Welcome to the AtlantECO podcast, where we talk about the science behind the AtlantECO project, the Atlantic Ocean, and the human adventures experienced along the way. Here, we have conversations with guests from around the world who work together so that we can better understand, manage, and protect the ocean. So let's embark on the journey of AtlantECO and discover the world that lies above and beneath the surface of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. Welcome back to the AtlantECO podcast. Today we have a conversation about ecosystem services with our guest, Donata Canu. We have made references to ecosystem services many times already in previous episodes. And today Donata will tell us what these are, why they are important to study, and how we can use that knowledge to help manage the ocean and its resources. Donata, welcome. It's a pleasure to speak with you today.
Hello, Eloise. Nice to speak to you and happy to be your guest today.
Before we dive into today's topic, we'd like to know a little bit more about you. So maybe can you share with us what started your connection with the ocean, what inspired you to do what you do today, and your journey on how you got to what you do today?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Well, I think my connection with the ocean started when I was a kid. I used to live in Italy, but far from the sea. So the first connection with the ocean is the wilderness of camping on a harvested wet field, hosted by a farmer's family in an almost empty Adriatic coast. And other camps in the Mediterranean, in the Argentario rocky coast, in the pine woods. At the time was possible to do this. And beach cleanup at the arrival with my family. That was a quite unusual thing to do more than 40 years ago. But my parents were environmentalists, my mom biologist, so they told me about pollution, about biogeochemical cycles, and looking at the marine life from one side and at the garbage that was there. I remember collecting pieces of tar from the beaches and asking where they came from. And this is when my connection with the sea and with my ecological attitude started. Years later, I enrolled in environmental science in Venice, and this connection became deeper.
Nice. And how did you get involved in AtlantECO?
I got involved in AtlantECO in the team working on ecosystem services. Since in the last few years, I was adopting this approach in my research to highlight on one side the importance of the ocean and of its ecosystem for the human well-being. And on the other side, the negative effects that uncontrolled human activities can have on the ecosystems and in turn on ecosystem services and then on their sustainability.
Can you maybe tell us what your job is today and where you are based?
Yes, today I work at the Italian Institute of Oceanography and Applied Geophysics in Trieste. In the oceanographic department, I'm part of the marine model group where we deal with physical, biogeochemical models, so to understand how sea functions in their physics, in their exchange with the atmosphere, and also in their biogeochemistry. That means how substances that enter in the ocean are transformed by the ocean and how the ocean cycles regulate also the cycles of nutrients, of substances, the production of fisheries, and so on. And also how the pollution is regulated in the ocean.
Yeah, very interesting and very important work indeed. So in today's episode, we want to know more about marine ecosystem services. But before we dive into understanding ecosystem services, I think it might be useful as a reminder or as an explainer to say really what is an ecosystem?
Yes, an ecosystem is a system that includes the whole biological community that lives in an environment, all the relationships that occur among the biological communities that live in the environment, and interrelation with the environment itself.
Right, so it's the context within which all the living things, so when we talk about biology, it's all the living things, so how they interact with one another, how they live in a specific context, and then how they interact with that specific context.
And they also modify the context where they live. So, as you said, all the living community from the micro to the macro.
Let's go back to today's topic and discuss ecosystem services and also why we study them. So, can you explain what these are and why it is important that we study them?
Yes, marine ecosystem services is a kind of framework that is meant to help to understand better how ecosystems work and what they provide to society. It's a framework that is meant to translate the science to the policymakers and to the public. So ecosystem services are defined as the benefit provided by nature and by ecosystems to humans. They are the so-called provisioning services, so the products provided by sea, regulating services, and cultural benefit. So the products provided by sea, for example, are the fisheries, the people provided by sea, aquaculture, but also genetic resources, chemical compounds with pharmaceutical and industrial applications. We can mention the bryostatine, for example, and other chemicals that have been discovered in the sea and now are used in the pharmaceutical. For example, the HIV therapy is based on a biomolecule that was found in the sea. So it's important to maintain and to preserve them, also if we don't know yet what is there, also for the future generations, so to ensure sustainability. Other ecosystem services are the regulating one, that are, for example, those that regulate the climate, the carbon sequestration, the mitigation of our climate. The regulating services are those, for example, that provide habitat for marine species. And then we have cultural benefits that are those that we all experience where we are by the sea. The wellness, the relax, the enjoyment of the landscape, and the traditions that bound humans to the sea.
So a lot of services provided by our oceans, and therefore, very important to know what the status is, how they are evolving over time, and maybe predict and model how they will be in the future, so we can sustain those benefits that we get from them. And to bring this into the context of AtlantECO, can you share with us how we are studying these aspects and about the specific services that we are focusing on in the project?
Yeah, we are studying this subject because we are interested in the preservation of the good state of the ocean and of its ecosystems. So we are studying them to understand them better, because the ocean is huge and our ability to go deep and to go far into the ocean is not so well developed. We can monitor, for example, its surface from with satellites, but we still do not have these strength, these tools, but still we don't have the ability to monitor all the oceans. So we have to use also modeling tools, including the ecosystem services framework, to understand how is the state of the ocean and if our actions are ensuring or not the sustainability of the ecosystems and of the services. So going into AtlantECO, we are now focusing on specific provisioning, regulating, and cultural ecosystem services. And we aim to use the new information acquired in AtlantECO to deepen our knowledge and our understanding of these ecosystem services. And for example, we will focus on the food provision with fisheries, for example, on the carbon sequestration, or how the Atlantic Ocean contributes to carbon budget, and which are the possible adverse effects of pollution on climate change to these ecosystem services. And moreover, the novelty of AtlantECO and the challenge of AtlantECO is the use of the metagenomic data to understand how ecosystem works, and then to analyze also the ecosystem services they provide. So this new information, we aim and we are challenged to be able to use this new information into our framework.
So maybe before you go on, maybe for our listeners that are not familiar with what metagenomic data is, can you maybe explain what it is?
Yes, we can observe the sea, for example, measuring with classical instrument its state, for example, temperature, salinity, chemicals, measuring and counting the animals, also the microbiota. But there is this innovation tool that is the metagenomic, that is going into the genes to see not only what is there, but how they function, because the genes can tell us what genomic patrimonium is, but also how the different environmental conditions are affecting these genes. And this is frontier studies that is conducted in AtlantECO.
Yeah, so we're going deeper and deeper into the invisible, so adding layers of information to the models that are created.
Yes, and additionally, AtlantECO also involves modelers, and we are also studying the future trends in the Atlantic Ocean and in its biogeochemical cycles. So our aim in the ecosystem services team is to be able to integrate these climate projections and the results of the scenarios to represent the possible future of the Atlantic Ocean and of its ecosystem services.
Yeah, and this information is then going to be shared with the people that make policies and people that manage the resources, so that they can make better decisions, and that the policies that will help regulate how we use the resources of the ocean can make those decisions based on the knowledge that we've created in AtlantECO, right?
Right.
Great. So, well, that was a very interesting introduction to ecosystem services. And in future episodes of the podcast, we will for sure come back to learn about the results. You know, what have we learned in AtlantECO? How are our models looking like, and how useful will they be for those making decisions? So I'm sure we will come back to you or your team to learn about those outcomes in the project. Donata, I want to thank you for your time today and for sharing your insight with us on the podcast.
Thank you, Eloise.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode and look forward to seeing you next time. You can follow the AtlantECO project on our website on www.atlanteco.eu, and you can also find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. All the links and information on the project and on today's episode is in the show notes. AtlantECO is a project funded under Horizon 2020, a European Union research and innovation programme.